Now, we already know that what is functional testing and what is the starting point of doing the functional testing. That was Swagger. Now, what's next? So, now next comes the planning of your testing. That is creating a test plan. So, welcome to part 3 of functional testing series. In this video, we will be covering how you can create a test plan before starting your actual functional testing. So, let's understand. So, what is a test plan? Test plan is a kind of document which gives the detailed information about what is the scope of your testing, what is the objective of your testing, and what all resources you will be consuming during your testing process, and what all different activities and strategies you will be performing during your testing. So what kind of testing you will be doing, what will be the different test cases you will be including, everything will be there in your test plan. So it will be a kind of a blueprint which you will follow throughout your testing process. So it's just like whenever you are going to a vacation, you make a plan, right? You make a bookings to the flight, and you make the bookings to the hotel rooms and indoor and outdoor activities, planning everything before going to the vacation, right? So similarly, whenever you are testing any product or an application, you need to plan beforehand. Why? Because it's really important to understand the product before and to write your cases and the main things you will be needing throughout your testing journey. So it's really important to plan it so that in the future it will be more efficient, and you in the future you won't regret like you haven't planned it earlier. So this makes your throughout testing journey very smooth and efficient. So planning your testing is really important. So next comes different components of your test plan. So test plan is a kind of document I have already told, right? So in that document there are different components you can include. So the very first one is the objective. So what is the objective? It's the goal. So what the application you want the application to do, what is the end goal of your application? If I talk about the products application which we have developed, its end goal is to perform all CRUD operations successfully, like it can add, delete, edit and everything to the products. It can do that. That is the objective. So your main goal is to make that API is working or the application is working as expected. So that is the objective, the main component of your plan. Next comes the scope. Scope is what all things you will be including while doing your testing. So as if I talk about the products API, I'll be including the testing of all CRUD operations, the functional performance testing of an API, the backend APIs, not the UI part. So I will be including the API testing, but out of scope is the UI testing. So I won't be doing the UI testing. So that is not in scope. So I'll write everything in the scope section, what is included and what is not included. That is the scope component. Next comes the environment, test environment. So it gives, I will give the details about the tools I'll be using in the test environment. For example, for functional manual testing, I'll be using Postman, and for the automation, I'll be using Rest Assured on IntelliJ. And my backend, my database will be H2 database, and my application is in Spring Boot. All the information I'll be giving it the test environment. Next comes the test approach. So I will give the approach of my testing, like what kind of testing I'll be doing: the manual testing through Postman, I'll be doing the automation, I'll be doing what all different kinds of testing I'll be doing. For example, if I'm doing performance, I'll write the performance testing in my test approach here as well. Next and the most important is test scenarios. So here you will write all the positive and negative test scenarios with the test cases of all the endpoints of your API. So in test scenarios, you will cover the different positive, negative scenarios and make the test cases of those scenarios for each and every endpoint. So we have different endpoints like get, put, post, and delete. We will be writing different test cases for those endpoints, including all the positive and negative scenarios. So that will be our the part of our test plan. Next comes the test data. So what kind of data we will be using? We write the data description here. So in some cases, in some products, you cannot use the real data. For example, if you are testing some banking application, you cannot use the actual data, right? So you must be needing a virtual data, right? So for in those cases, you have to have data beforehand before starting your testing. So that is also required to make a plan for your test data, what kind of test data you will be needing for doing your testing, whether a virtual or real, what data you will be needing. So that you need to include in your test plan. Next comes the defect management. So what if you are testing your application and there are bugs in the application? So what you will be doing on those scenarios? On those scenarios, you will be reporting it somewhere to someone, and you will be managing it through some software or something like that. So we will be using Jira in our case. So you can manage those defects, and you can write the management criteria in your test plan. So how you will be managing your defects whenever there is a defect in your application. So that point you can include in your test plan. Next comes the risks and mitigation. So this comes whenever you are testing something, right? So it can be a scenario that the application doesn't work. So what will be your approach to mitigate those kind of risks? You need to plan beforehand that those kind of risks can occur. For example, you are using some database and it got crashed and your whole data got erased. So what will be your response in that? So as a tester, you need to get the backup of all your data before testing it, right? So those things also goes in your test planning, because if you don't plan ahead about the risks and mitigation, then you cannot give the deadline or the timeline for your sign offs, right? So always include risks and mitigation processes there as well. Next comes, and the most important one, is the deliverable. So while doing the whole testing, what will be you delivering to your project managers or the delivery leads? So in from your end, you will be delivering this test plan. Next will be your test cases. Then you will be delivering the defect reports. So all these things you will include in your deliverables, that you will be delivering these things. So these are the main components of your test plan. Then you can also give the timeline as well. If you are working in an agile framework, then you can include different sprints. You will be doing this much testing in one sprint and this much testing in another sprint, according to the whatever the approach you are following in your project and what is the deadline of that. So you can also provide the timeline in your test plan. So that is optional, because here we are not following any kind of timeline, so I haven't included it. But yes, you can always include a timeline or a schedule you will be using to make your full-fledged testing. So these are the basic components of a test plan that you need to follow. So next comes, for our product API, I have already created a test plan. So I'll go through it so that you can relate to it whenever we are doing the further steps of our testing. So I'll follow this test plan throughout our testing journey. So as you can see that we have the objective. So objective of our test plan for this product's API is to ensure that product API is performing correctly and it's good in for all the crude operations. So it is performing accurately as per the expectation. That is the objective. Next comes the scope. So here in our testing we will be doing the crude operation testing, its response, code validation and the different messages, the error handling we will be validating, different data validations we will do. We will see the authentication and authorization is working fine or not. All of these things are in scope, but as of now UI testing is not in scope for our functional testing of products API. So you can see that in the scope I have divided into two categories: in scope and out of scope. Next comes the test environment. So you can see that we have different environments like tools. We will be using Postman, Rest Assured, Swagger, and Jira. And backend is our Spring Boot, database is H2 database. We will be using, and authentication is basic authentication. And the test approach, we will be doing manual and automated testing using Postman and Rest Assured, respectively. In the test scenarios, we will be covering all the positive scenarios. I have given few of them here, like verifying all the products, verifying that the product is added successfully or not, whether we are able to edit it or not, and delete it or not. These are the positive scenarios. So we will be including all those scenarios in the form of test cases here only, and also including the negative test cases like what if I'm giving the non-existing product ID, what is the behavior of the application. So what if I'm deleting the product which is not existing, so what is the behavior. What if I'm not giving the authentication, what is the behavior. So I'll include all those scenarios in my test cases. So we will write the test cases in the upcoming video, but in my planning I will write that I have these kind of planning in my head. Next comes the test data. Here I can use any kind of valid product data I can use. So it can be valid, invalid, it can be anything, any kind of product I'll be using. I will also cover the boundary and edge cases scenarios. And for the defect management, we will be using Jira for planning all the defects and assigning those defects, and throughout the defect life cycle we will manage the defects from there only. Next is the risk mitigation. So we have included that it can be a risk of authentication failure, and our mitigation strategy will be validating the token. Next risk we can have of is data loss maybe, and our mitigation strategy will be backing up the data before testing. So that will be our risk and mitigations. And as a part of deliverables, at the end we will be delivering test cases, test execution report, and the defect report. So those will be our deliverable at the end of our functional testing. So yeah, this was all about the test plan. So we already have a test plan now. So from the next video, we will learn how to write the test cases, and we will write our first own test case, and we will create the test cases for all the endpoints in our next video, and we will understand what are the negative and positive scenarios. So stay tuned and keep learning. Thank you so much.